It is difficult for me to understand what has changed in my relationship with my mother-in-law. Earlier, we had a common language. She used to call me often and I used to visit her regularly. These calls were unexpected but pleasant. She did so just to chat with me and expressed her love. However, after I announced my pregnancy, my mother-in-law's behavior changed drastically. She stopped calling me. When I told her I love you, she did not reciprocate. Her visits were limited to wanting to see my husband. Most of the time, she tried to get him to leave the house with her. Greeting and saying goodbye to me became a mere formality for her. There was a time when she even tried to stay in my delivery room despite her refusal, arguing that she needed to support her son. She persistently held on to my husband's arm, trying to pull him to her side. The nurses were forced to remove her. Several months had passed since the birth of our daughter. During that time, my mother-in-law visited me about a dozen or 15 times, but only twice took my granddaughter in her arms. She continued to shadow my husband, trying to lead him away with her. She asked him to help around the house, take care of repairs, change tires or oil, fix the computer, and other household tasks. Honestly, what bothers me the most is my mother-in-law's comments about my daughter's appearance. She claims that the child does not resemble me at all and looks identical to her and my husband. To understand the situation, it is worth noting that my husband does not look like his mother. He is an exact replica of his father. His mother is a short blonde woman with brown eyes, while he is a tall man with black hair and green eyes. Their parentage is not obvious. Nevertheless, my mother-in-law insists that my daughter looks like her and my husband, ignoring any similarities to my appearance. These comments she has repeated countless times. I usually just agree to keep the conflict from escalating. Yesterday, at a family dinner I invited my mother-in-law to, she brought along an album of photos of herself and my husband from birth to present day. She emphasized the fact that my daughter, according to her, is not actually mine. My husband repeatedly objected, pointing out that my daughter did resemble me. His mother, however, did not relent. The situation escalated when my mother-in-law approached my mother. My mother, who does not tolerate nonsense, reacted sharply, emphasizing that the girl looks like me and has nothing to do with the appearance of my mother-in-law. This statement caused me surprise, as my mother-in-law persistently tried to prove the opposite, despite the obvious lack of similarity between her appearance and that of my husband. No one in the house uttered a word after the incident, although some could not hide a smile. My husband remained silent, looking stunned, like a deer caught in the headlights. After my mother-in-law left the event, she sent my husband and I a text message. In it, she expressed her displeasure, stating that she would never forgive us for not standing up for her in front of my mother. In her opinion, we had allowed my mother to publicly humiliate her by making her look bad in front of everyone. I myself have no remorse about it, while my husband feels uncomfortable. It should be noted that my mother-in-law has 4 children, and my husband is the youngest of them. He is 27 years old. 2 of her daughters have 1 child each and her other son has 5 children. My mother-in-law takes an active role in the lives of her daughter's children, taking them to visit her once a month. However, she has never shown similar attention to her other son's children. She seems to treat her other children with complete indifference. Your mother-in-law seems to feel sidelined, and this situation clearly demonstrates her place in your family structure. She is trying to reassert her position in the family through her relationship with your husband, but unfortunately she is not choosing the most successful methods to do so. This may be because your mother-in-law's generation often finds it difficult to communicate openly and effectively. Instead, she resorts to passive aggression. However, this does not make you to blame for the situation. Inside your mother-in-law may be lurking the idea that she no longer plays the role of mother in her son's life because he now has a family of his own. She wants to be the central figure again, although it would be wonderful if she could elegantly accept the natural change by becoming a loving grandmother and a valued older family member whose presence is welcomed and cannot be overlooked. If she continues to behave this way, her name will cause resentment and her absence will cause relief. Your mother-in-law exhibits strange behavior towards her youngest son, your husband, especially after you became pregnant. Your mom is acting like a true protector, standing up for her child and calling things by their proper names. Next story. My wife and I, both 29 years old, planned to have a Thanksgiving holiday dinner last year. All preparations were made in advance, and we invited our loved ones, parents on both sides, my siblings, and my sister's family. However, our plans were disrupted due to the health of my wife, who was 31 weeks pregnant. A few days before the holiday, she had to have an emergency C-section. Without going into too much detail, I will say that we had to cancel dinner and my wife and our newborn baby spent some time in the hospital. Over the Christmas and New Year's holidays, my wife and I opted to stay home as she was recovering from surgery. We didn't feel like doing any holiday organizing. However, after feeling better, my wife suggested that we have a family dinner to make up for the moments we missed together. Thus, we planned a dinner for yesterday. Being vegans, we usually don't mind having meat dishes around, but prefer not to keep them in our home. My sister, a 35-year-old married woman with 2 sons under the age of 10, came along with her family. As we were preparing dinner for everyone, my sister's husband asked where the real food was. After we explained that all of the food would be vegan, I noticed my wife become a little tense over this comment. I immediately secluded my family and politely asked them to refrain from making such comments. They promised to be more tactful, and my sister's husband apologized for his behavior. However, just as I finished cooking, the phone rang. My sister assumed it was a food delivery. Turns out she was right. She had ordered fried chicken for her children, arguing that the vegan dishes we offered were unlikely to appeal to their tastes. This action caused a serious conflict between us, as she had not notified me of her order in advance, a situation I would have preferred to avoid. The conversation eventually turned into an argument, after which I asked my sister and her family to leave our home. This in turn upset my parents, who also decided to leave. The evening ended with only me, my wife, and some of my relatives left at dinner. I reflected on my actions, realizing that my parents and sister were now resentful of me and expected an apology for my reaction. My main goal was to create a comfortable and pleasant atmosphere for my wife in our home. My sister decided to order fried chicken for her kids, not assuming they would want to try the vegan alternatives we prepared. They didn't even try our dishes, which seemed extremely rude to me. I find it odd that there was no attempt to get the kids interested in new flavors. If my sister had been sure that their children wouldn't want to eat the dishes we offered, perhaps it would have been worth organizing supervision at home, giving us advance notice of their absence. It's hard for me to understand why offering vegan burgers and fries elicited such a reaction. After all, fries are a versatile meat-free dish. The main problem seems to be my sister's attitude toward her children's nutrition. She seems unwilling to stimulate their interest in new types of food. This whole situation might have been avoided if it had been communicated in advance that the dinner would be served exclusively vegan. It is generally considered polite to notify guests of the upcoming menu well in advance, regardless of its specifics. This avoids misunderstandings and allows guests to prepare for the proposed experience. On the other hand, ordering takeout without prior approval can also look inappropriate, especially in the context of an organized family dinner. Indeed, children under the age of 10 often prefer familiar foods such as fried chicken, which makes your sister's choice understandable from her point of view. However, the reaction of everyone involved in the event was unnecessarily harsh, which in turn led to conflict. The decision to kick the guests out instead of trying to resolve the situation through calm dialogue may not have been the best course of action. In the end, communication and mutual understanding are key to preventing situations like this, where each party could set out their expectations and preferences in advance, thus ensuring a smooth and enjoyable family event. Now I want to tell a different story. My sister-in-law married my brother, who is 10 years older than her. From a past relationship, they have daughters who are now 18 years old. My niece dreamed of a large family, including siblings. While still in kindergarten, she repeatedly asked her father to add another child to the family, be it a sibling. From the beginning, it was obvious that the girls' personalities were very different. My niece showed an increased demand for time with her half-sister. Their parents, including my brother and his wife, were eager for the girls to spend more time together. Consequently, they were supportive of my niece's demanding behavior and expressed resentment when my step-niece sought to establish a relationship with her sister on her own. My niece acted without consulting her stepsister, deciding for both of them on her own. She did not ask her step-niece's opinion, but simply informed her of her decisions. Neither my brother nor his wife reacted to this behavior. If the step-niece expressed disagreement by saying no, my niece insisted, denying the possibility of a choice. Because of this, I shared my concerns with my brother. He recognized that such actions could alienate his stepdaughter from him in the long run. However, he also emphasized how important it was for his daughter to have a sister and how much his wife was eager for her child to be accepted as a sister. In view of these circumstances, he decided not to intervene in the situation. A few days ago, an incident occurred when my daughter-in-law addressed her stepdaughter, Stepa, about the need to get used to having a sister in her life. She emphasized the importance of making time for her sister as a useful practice for the future. In response, Stepa stated that she could do quite well without seeing her, to which the daughter-in-law objected, arguing that such an outcome was impossible because Stepa would always be part of the family. After Stepa came of age in July, she left the house and ceased all contact with the family, despite her sister's attempts to connect through direct messages or calls, which were ignored or even resulted in blocking. To the surprise of only my sister-in-law and my niece, Stepa completely disengaged from the family. My niece was particularly shocked and cried for days without understanding the reasons, while my sister-in-law continued to express her displeasure for months. However, at a Christmas family dinner on December 30, the situation escalated when the daughter-in-law openly criticized her daughter in front of everyone present, causing alienation from most of the family. When she tried to share her worries with me, I pointed out that only she and her niece were surprised by Stepa's behavior, while the rest of the family had anticipated this outcome from afar. When I broached the subject, my step-niece shared details with me about her actions and feelings 2 years ago, but my sister-in-law reacted with disbelief. She accused me of being insensitive and argued that it was impossible to predict that the teenager was speaking seriously when she showed signs of an emotional outburst. In her opinion, most children would never want to be estranged from their siblings or families. She considered my words a cruel lie and called me an idiot for suggesting otherwise. People like your sister-in-law sometimes act like stepfathers in an effort to create the perfect picture of family relationships, which often leads to undesirable consequences. On a daily basis, they try to strengthen ties within the family, often pushing the boundaries of what is reasonable. Stories of parents who try to get their adopted children to love their new family members often end in failure. They are trying to mold their new and old family members into a perfect image that exists only in their imagination. Your desire to convey to your daughter-in-law the simple truth she needs to understand has suddenly turned you into the villain of the situation. Your daughter-in-law was so consumed with the idea of creating the perfect family that she ended up being like an evil stepmother to her daughter, not realizing the consequences of her actions. Now, faced with reality, she is surprised by the consequences that have come. At the same time, your brother seemed unable to resist making comments all these years, which only added fuel to the fire. Your daughter-in-law will not be able to rewrite history or portray your daughter in a negative light given the failures that followed her actions. Empty talk won't make things right, especially since some family members still keep in touch with your step-niece and are willing to keep her informed of all the happenings. My next story. Last night, my friend came to my house to stay the night. Upon arrival, she informed me that she was cold and asked to borrow a sweatshirt. All of our clothes are usually kept in my sister's room, as her and I often have similar-looking clothes. My sister favors oversized clothes, choosing them in the men's section of stores, which is part of her style. Our mom was regularly confused about whose clothes were in front of her, so we decided to purchase a large closet and place it in my sister's room, which was more spacious. My closet was moved from my room to make room. When I headed to my sister's room to get a sweatshirt for my friend, I found the door closed. We have a rule in our house. Doors can only be closed during dressing time or when silence is needed for studying. I knocked, but before my sister could answer, my friend burst into the room. Luckily, my sister was studying, however, she and I were quite surprised. My friend, without noticing my sister or my embarrassment, walked over to the closet and started picking out a sweatshirt she liked. My sister, with sarcasm in her voice, remarked that it was now okay to peek at the contents of the closet without notice. In response, my friend abruptly threw some harsh words, emphasizing that the closet did not belong exclusively to my sister. This incident came as a surprise to me, as my friend is usually characterized by gentleness, and I had never heard her swear words before. I could not remain idle when my sister was insulted in front of me. Calmly taking her hand, I gently led her out of my sister's room. Then, taking her bag, we left the house together. On the street, waiting for her friend who lived nearby, we were in complete silence. From that moment on, communication between us broke down. I tried to re-establish contact by texting and calling to apologize for my perhaps overly emotional reaction. I wanted to discuss my behavior towards my sister with her, but there was never a response. I am truly sorry for my actions, however. I cannot deny that feelings of anger about her treatment of my sister remain. My behavior can be condemned, but emotions took over. Indeed, I would not have blamed my friend if her patience had broken precisely because of these unusual house rules. Rules so strict and specific could easily piss anyone off. I believe that each of you acted rashly, your friend for behaving defiantly, barging into other people's rooms and getting into conflicts, and you for the way you acted in response. In the future, when faced with a similar situation, you will need to use adult words. It is important to explain why this behavior is unacceptable, discuss expectations for the guest behavior, how you treat each other as a family, etc. And of course, if it is necessary to end the visit, simply taking the guest's belongings and walking them out of the house is not the best way to resolve the conflict. It is also important to take care of your own belongings, wash them and store them in your room to maintain order and harmony in the house. A story that really surprised me. I'm a woman, 58 years old. My son was born when I was 17 years old, while I was still in high school. Unprepared for the role of parent, I made the decision to openly adopt. The adoptive family shared the joy of his growing up with me through birthday and holiday cards. However, my son was diagnosed with an ocular nerve disease, which caused him to lose his vision. This made me feel guilty, as if I had something to do with his illness. However, there was also relief. The realization that I had a life to move on, a life of my own to build. I went to college, built a career, and every time my adoptee's family contacted me to share news of his accomplishments, such as the first typewriter designed for the blind, I felt guilty about my relief at not having faced those challenges myself. Now married, my husband and I have 2 daughters, ages 32 and 28. They have always known of the existence of a brother who was adopted by another family. My daughters have always shown an interest in fostering a bond with the brother they adopted. While I thought it was best to leave him alone so he could live his life without our interference, my oldest daughter found him through Facebook. Thanks to her, he has become a part of our family over the past few years. Despite the bond that has developed between them, I still feel uncomfortable admitting that I don't feel like his mother. I'm glad he's doing well. He's getting married this spring and has earned his PhD in physics. These accomplishments make me proud, but he's still a stranger to me. For Thanksgiving, we gathered as a family, including my son, who uses a guide dog for mobility. He often takes her harness off, giving her a chance to play with the other pets. That day, as usual, I gave the dog a few treats without giving it much thought. However, a few days later it was discovered that the dog ended up in the emergency veterinary hospital with problems possibly related to his pancreas and a bone lodged in his intestines. The decision was made to have surgery to correct the problem. After the guide dog incident, my daughter accused me of negligence for giving the dogs leftovers from the table. She was convinced that I should take financial responsibility for the problems that had occurred. In response to her demands, I offered my son to pay for the dog's medical treatment. He gratefully declined the offer, mentioning that the cost was covered through his pet insurance, which only requires payment of 10% of the total amount after deductible, and assured me of his ability to cover the cost. My attempt to help and show concern did not alleviate the accusations from my daughter. She continued to view me as irresponsible, rebuking me for my unwillingness to admit fault in causing the damage. Refusing to accept my money as compensation, she also decided not to trust me to look after her dogs in the future. This situation underscored the differences in our understanding of responsibility and mutual aid in the family. If a dog turns out to have choked on leftover food, you should be relieved that you did not have to bear the financial burden of treating the animal. Criticism in such a situation, as well as support from the daughter, becomes understandable. You may be frustrated that your daughter has turned to her half-brother for help, emphasizing that you don't have to maintain close ties with him. However, your children's right to seek contact with their brother remains undeniable. It may seem that your daughter looks down on her brother, which can cause misunderstandings given his blindness. Despite his physical limitations, his accomplishments, including earning a doctorate in physics, indicate great potential and ability. Actions that may harm animals without thinking of the consequences raise questions. Such moments raise concerns and question responsibility. You may be wondering why there is so much negativity toward you, especially when it comes to your son, whom you may not consider close to you. Tension in family relationships because of these situations emphasizes the difficulty of understanding and mutual respect between family members.